I just wanted there to be a climactic, coital song about banging.
Today we are ranking the albums of Ghost, starting with Opus Eponymous in 2010. These songs were written in 2008 and recorded in a basement studio in their hometown of Linköping, Sweden. The Ghouls said that they approached a number of potential vocalists, including Messiah Markolin of Candlemass, Mats Levin, and J.B. Kristofferson, before Forge decided to do it himself. I'd also say this is the most overtly retro-sounding album, which I'd consider to be kind of a pro and a con. On the one hand, from the writing and performances to the production choices, this really does nail the target of making an album that sounds straight out of the 70s. But on the other, I feel like it's missing some of the more unique flair that I appreciate from their later stuff. Still, lots of killer moments. Love the bass opening up Con Clave Con Dio, Prime Mover, and alongside the awesome synthesizer on Satan Prayer. And of course, Stand By Him is the perfect single. I could definitely hear this being played alongside Inagata de Vida back in the day. Then there's the very doomy at times Black Sabbath-coded death knell. Love the big bell on that one too. Great harmonized vocals and infectious guitar hook on Ritual. Plenty of righteous riffs and great atmosphere. A solid front to back and a nice lean 34 minutes. It managed to stay on the charts for 5 weeks, hitting number 50, and was even nominated for a Swedish Grammy and named the third best album of the decade by Swedish Rock Magazine, just behind Iron Maiden. I am going to put this one at fantastic. Then we have Infestissumam in 2013. This album was recorded in Nashville with Nick Rakulinix, and apparently because of the location, they had trouble finding a choir that would sing satanic lyrics. They ended up having to do that in Hollywood, of course. Conceptually, the last album left off with the Antichrist being born, and this one picks up with his story. It's a bit more diverse musically, with some cool elements like the great choir, as well as some strings and just different approaches. Right from the top, you can hear the difference with the intro going into the kind of Iron Maiden guitars of Per Aspera ad Inferi. Unfortunately, I still don't feel like that diversity translates to as good of an album in terms of overall songwriting, though. A lot of this album feels kind of low energy to me and even a bit dull at times. Like, for instance, I love the bouncy carnival organ on Secular Haze, but somehow that track still puts me to sleep. I think the obvious standouts for me are Zombie Queen and Year Zero, that second one in particular having another one of those supremely infectious choruses. Idolatrine is also pretty good. But to me, this album definitely has some sophomore slump issues. A lot of the songs just don't have that same fun or memorability factor for me. Still, plenty of people love it, and it debuted at number 1 on the Swedish charts, quintupling the sales of the number 2 album. I'm going to put this one at good tier, and I already know that's going to be a very unpopular opinion. By the way, as always, this is just my opinion, so if you're enjoying the video, hit the like button and comment below your own rankings, your own thoughts. Where do you agree? Where do you disagree? Also, if you enjoy Ghost, you might also want to check out Twin Temple. They describe their sound as satanic doo-wop, and it basically sounds like those old Phil Spector Motown records, just with much darker satanic-focused lyrics. Really interesting stuff. But next up, we have Meliora in 2015. I can feel the thunder that's breaking in your heart. They wanted to really focus on guitars with this album, and apparently playing with a new guitar rig inspired some sounds they considered to have kind of a sci-fi vibe. They also opted to go with Mellotron choirs to gel with that sound, and also after the difficulties from the previous album. The focus is around an absence of God and what happens under those circumstances. And I'd say this record better harnesses the diversity of the last record while seriously stepping up the hooks and general catchiness. This thing is packed with riffs. Spirit is a very strong opening track to set the tone, and then it gets followed up by that chunky bass groove on From the Pinnacle to the Pit, which in some places reminds me of Voivod, though the Ghouls stated it was more inspired by Led Zeppelin. Syrize, which won a US Grammy for Best Metal Song, is a fun stomper with some Iron Butterfly vibes. Love the little poppy breaks with the piano and additional percussion to amp up the contrast of the light and dark portions. I also think I hear a timpani among other things. Mummy Dust is another banger with some great organ melodies and the simple little piano flourish that reminds me of Nine Inch Nails buried in like a Queen song. Majesty has some fun, really fantastic riffage throughout, both from the rhythm to the lead guitars. This made several best of the year lists and this time won a Swedish Grammy. It is going to perfection. Love it. Now, unfortunately, on the flip side of all this success, this is also around the time that the drama really started, with 4 members suing Tobias for royalties and accusing him of withholding financial information and payments. This isn't really the place to get in all that here, but I think it is worth mentioning. But that brings us to Prequelle in 2018. So after that, this was the first time Ghost was putting out an album with Tobias formally confirmed to be the frontman after years of keeping his identity a secret. He described the recording process on this album to be a much more streamlined and focused affair, which probably has something to do with him kind of like being in charge of all the decision making at this point. But overall, I'd say it feels like a continuation of the sound from the previous album with maybe even more of an arena energy. Rats is the big single on this one, which is a solid one, but I don't think it's as good as Syrize. I actually prefer Faith, which has more of a hook and headbang vibe alongside the church organ, as well as some fun turns in the vocal performance. Dance Macabre lives up to its name, really getting my foot tapping. As I said last time, I keep expecting Danny Sexbang of Ninja Sex Party to make a surprise appearance on this track. Miasma also has a cool saxophone solo, but after that, things kind of peter out for me for the rest of the album. A few more kind of fillery tracks, but a good journey nonetheless. I'm going to put this one at great tier. And again, I think some people are going to be upset that this is above this one, but that's just my opinion. But next up is Impera in 2022. Inspired by a book called The Rule of Empires, Those Who Built Them, Those Who Endured Them, and Why They Always Fall. Amazing opener with the epic intro transitioning into the upbeat Kaiserion, which sounds like something off of Rush's Moving Pictures. And get ready to hear a lot of comparisons on this album, because it really is all over the place. Love the dramatic 80s staccato piano line on Spillways. This one reminds me of Hold the Line by Toto. I also love the little breaks in the instrumentation punctuated by the pounding of the toms.
Through benediction, you try to rid your mind of malediction.
And if that was infectious, Call Me Little Sunshine is straight up entrancing. And not only is it impossible for me to not sing along on this one, but also pantomime to the words like a little kid doing some melodramatic TikTok. Hunter's Moon is among the more crunchy 80s metal-styled tunes on the album, with that very Alice Cooper evil delivery of the title and more ominous melodies.
It's a hunter's moon.
Also in this category is Watcher in the Sky, with more chugging riffs driving it ever forwards like a demonic steam engine, and once more, holy shit to the dueling guitar lines later on. Dominion gives us a nice little brass interlude that feels straight out of a Stanley Kubrick film in its dark, somber tones, leading us into the bombastic symphonic intro of 20s, which contrasts with more of a Danny Elfman energy before breaking into a riff that, alongside the chunky, rumbling bass, is straight up Faith No More.
In the 20s, we'll be singing in a rain of pennies.
Darkness at the Heart finally breaks the intensity with a moody power ballad, complete with some fun finger snapping, kind of a Journey meets Queen vibe on this one. Underrated song too, it's actually one of my favorites. Griffwood transitions nicely into a kind of Van Halen-esque guitar intro, reminiscent of Ain't Talking About Love. And then we close with the brief but haunting acoustic of Bite of Passage, and then Respite on the Spitalfields. Concluding on a very atmospheric note with that very same simple yet memorable guitar hook that kicked this whole thing off to begin with. This was an album that was extremely divisive, with fans either loving or hating it at the time, but personally, I love pretty much every second of it, and it continues to be a favorite for me. I listened to it in preparation for this list. I listen to all of them again, like I usually do. But man, coming back to this one, I think it's only better than it was back then. So this one is also going to perfection for me. And that brings us to Skeletá in 2025.
Your love, bright as the starlight. Oh, child, still we can see.
Can I just point out that it's a little bit weird that the Pope actually died the week of this album's release? Regardless, getting into the album, I like Peacefield, but I consider it to be one of their weaker openers and definitely singles overall. Some really great singing, at times even reminiscent of Journey's Separate Days, Worlds Apart, just not a favorite of mine. And this album in general feels like it is going back to the more retro, stripped-back feel of the first two albums, both in writing and production. It's not nearly as flashy or glam rock as Impera, with plenty of lower-key tracks like slow ballad Guiding Lights, De Profundis Borealis, and frankly, pretty milquetoast closer Excelsis. I'm just more about tracks like Lacrima, such a fun song, very catchy, tons of hooks both in the vocals and the instrumentation. I've been singing along to this one non-stop, especially with all the fun little vocal inflections. Unfortunately, that song almost ends up feeling like false advertising as a single. But there are still some other solid moments deeper in, like Cenotaph, which is another one with some Rush vibes and pretty impressive guitar work alongside the proggy synths. Also dig the infectious classic metal energy and subtle darkness of Mycelia Amori and Marks of the Evil One, as well as the fun use of cowbell and organ on Umbra. And then, of course, there's the also very catchy Satanized with more funky Faith No More bass and guitar.
I'm satanized.
Frankly though, I gotta say, I'm kinda disappointed. I'll be curious what the fan consensus is gonna be on this one, as I could see some being much happier with the band seeming to take notes from the people who didn't like Impera. But personally, I really enjoyed the more dramatic and bombastic direction they seemed to be headed. I tried to see if this one would be a grower over multiple listens, but in this case, the more I went back to it, the less I enjoyed it overall. So I am actually going to put this one at good tier, and we'll see what the future holds. Y'all check out this playlist for more heavy metal rankings, or this video for your personal YouTube recommendation. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.